How are you?
Pretty good, Igor. It's nice finally to see and meet you, even if it's long distance.
Uh,
I know. I
What?
can't believe the two of you have not spoken yet or before.
Well, we've
no,
exchanged emails and letters back and forth, but we've never actually met like this face to face.
and it was quite a long time ago.
It was quite a long time ago. It was when you were
M- m-
working on Axis of the World, I think.
Maybe 10 years ago
Yeah, at least.
or more.
Yeah, at least.
Yeah.
So you have 10 years of historical catching up to do.
I, I mean, I no longer am doing any much research on this.
Uh-huh.
I'm writing books still, but on different topics.
Hmm.
Well, you're probably still going to have to do a little bit of backtracking in some of the books that you wrote, um, because there's a whole lot of, and you haven't really done a whole lot of interviews out in the West in English, have you? Besides TV
Yeah,
and
but I mean, I took part in some documentaries, but
Hmm.
not too many interviews as
that's what I'm.
such.
And a lot of people, well, for those of people who everybody should know who you are because you're the person that one back in the day wrote this book that
Hmm.
kicked
Hmm.
off so much research and
Oh
um,
yeah.
that for all of us. And I don't know how it ended up with me climbing through tunnels all over Europe, but to try to find what you found. But for people who are starting today, this book is still selling, and you have a second version. Did the second edition come out in English yet?
Uh, there is an extended edition. It's not edited in I mean so well. It's in flexi cover, but it should be available still. It's extended.
Outstanding.
Cool.
Now, um, you have to for new. That means for new people, younger people, that we are
Hmm.
trying to generate a little curiosity in their mind.
Just a moment. Somebody's calling to my door. Moment.
How
Sorry.
dare they? Well, I figure we need to have Igor tell a little bit about how he
Oh
finally
yeah.
got to that book because a lot of people they probably don't know.
Well,
Uh,
actually, that book, he originally released the Bell part of that book in 5 volumes that were in Polish. That were, uh, I think, eventually what he used to compile together in Truth About the Wunderwaffe. And the only reason I know that is my publisher, David Childress, had copies of those books.
really?
Yeah.
Well, I have
I'm
the
sorry.
only.
It's a courier. Just a moment. Okay.
No
Yeah.
worries. We're just talking about
We're
you.
just we're just talking about you. Yeah, it when Truth About the Wunderwaffe came out, it was, well, it kicked off Nick Cook's book Hunt for Zero Point,
Yeah.
and Hunt for Zero Point, which is the book that I read, was the book that then took me to Truth About the Wunderwaffe, and right about the time that Cook's book
I'm
came out,
I'm
Igor's book has finally been published in English.
I'm very sorry. I just got a parcel.
No worries. I had a chance to redo the camera setup because it looks better this way. Um, Igor, you have to tell the story of how the Book of the Wunderwaffe came through, and you probably going to have to talk a little bit about how you discovered the Bell story as well, because so much research and history and other books, and for some reason, every summer I crawl through tunnels looking for what you wrote about. How did this
Okay.
happen? So you go. You gotta take people who don't may not know that story through the journey.
I mean, it's a. But are you recording it?
Yes.
Okay. Uh, it started very long time ago. It's mid 1970. I mean 1990s when I started writing books about German secret weapons and something similar to what Henry Stevens did then, and it evolved. Eventually, after a couple of years, I was contacted by a guy from our services, who shared with me the story about the bell. It was, I would say, bits and pieces of the story. I had to glue it together, and because it was fascinating, and at the same time, I couldn't publish the documents that I was shown. The ambition of my life, at least at that stage, was to verify it. I started traveling to various archives, including in the United States, various archives in various countries. In Germany, I was trying to do some research on this in Argentina as well, and in Poland, of course. And uh, eventually, after several years, I had quite an extensive archival experience, and I have two large drawers full of documents. Some of them relate to this story, and after this, which took several years, uh, I was able to write this book that you showed, and later on, I wrote several other ones on this, and eventually I have published a book titled "The New Truth About the Wunderwaffe," which came out only in Poland in Polish, but it's pretty very well. Edited in a very pretty hardcover and so on. And it took me about, I don't know, 15 or 20 years, or this order of magnitude. I don't remember exactly. But what eventually, something that started pretty modestly, I would say, ended up in something that I will dare to say nobody has done before. Such a approach to technological developments in scientific developments in the Third Reich that shows that it was event. One may say that it presents something like a different model of civilization, which has achieved very much more than people appreciate and know generally, because what they do know is something that was in production. But I also described something that was in research in laboratories, which presented an entirely different level, pretty much unknown to this day. And there are different approaches to physics, to making atomic weapon, for example, and other such things. So I'm. It has surprised the final result has surprised me to in a bit, but I'm it's over for me now. I'm writing other books presently.
We'll get to your other books, but you're not off the hook for this one just yet, or for the foreseeable future of this day. Uh, well, what did you find? Because there's a lot of people that, fortunately, and I can very much also point to what Joseph have been doing and following up on this for the past many years, that we get new people and younger people who are waking up to the fact that history is not as black and white as it was written
Mm-hmm.
in 1945. And I think it's you got to share a little bit of what was the things that you found that has surprised you the most.
The thing that has surprised me the most in this stuff, was that I have found a document in which refers to the scientists involved in this project, because I was looking for documents by names of the people. And in one of the documents, which refers to a case where one of these guys was arrested by the Gestapo during the war uh, because he said something dubious, I would say. And the institution in which he worked has prepared a document for the Gestapo and for the court, stating that why he cannot be arrested, because he is involved in something of crucial importance, to such a degree that they refer to a specific conference where this project has been officially labeled as if it would be some kind of a higher kind of a secrecy, such as we have a secret, top secret, and so on, in which it was labeled as decisive for the war.
Mhm.
And it was probably the most amazing thing to me while I was researching for sources on this.
So what
But
was the project?
yeah, excuse me, I didn't
What,
hear you.
what was the project he was working on? What do we know?
He was working on something that was on some powering system for
Mhm.
for something which has not been specified. But I knew about him because he was mentioned in these documents about the bell.
The AEG was
Uh,
involved, the AEG document.
yes, it was a
Mhm.
research institute of the AG in Berlin. But one very, I would say, breaking or breakthrough document has been found by a fellow researcher uh, who is named Henry Stevens,
Mhm.
and he has written a book about Nazi secret projects. I don't remember the title exactly at this moment, but
Yes.
I may look at this.
Hitler's secret
Hitler's
weapons.
Hitler's suppressed and still secret
Secret tech.
weapons, and so
Yeah.
on,
Mhm.
uh, in which he has reproduced a document from the Nara archive near Washington, in College Park near Washington. It's a federal archive, U.S. archive,
Yes.
uh, referring to one of the scientists involved in this works in this research, uh, where it is uh, I mean specifically stated that they were working on controlling gravity, on experimental approach to the general theory of relativity, and it was achieved through plasma systems by spinning high voltage, ionized by high voltage plasma, and so on. So it was fitting. Uh, I mean, filling the gap in my puzzle.
This
It
was
was
the Bell Gap.
also pretty much so. I mean, it was a confirmation that they were trying to control gravity through plasma research, and it's very important. I mean,
Huge.
uh, yeah, because normally nobody would have believed that such a approach was possible at all. But it is, by the way, supplemented in a way by the fact that they had one outstanding scientist working on gravity in Germany during the war, whose name was Pascual Jordan. You would spell it Jordan.
Mhm.
Who later, after the war, who was he was a chairman of some foundation funding research on gravity in the US after the war. He was a very important scientist about which I mean about his wartime activity is to before it was almost completely unknown. It's it resembles the situation of other key scientists, such as Hermann Oberth, who was a father of the rocket science. Uh, yeah, theory of rocket flight, for example, like Professor Walter Gerlach was chairman of the Reich's Scientific Research Council, for example, and other such people, such as Werner Heisenberg, who you know uh, discovered the fission of uranium isotopes, for example, before the war. It from the generally accessible sources, one may draw a conclusion that such a people were doing nothing during the war. They were completely unknown persons. But I have discovered, for example, that Heisenberg did have his own research team in the occupied Czechoslovakia or Czechia, in the town Ústí nad Labem, in a former mine taken over by DSS. He had his own research team, was working continuously during the entire war on other approaches to nuclear weapons, for example, which is completely unknown in the West. And what I wanted to say is that this Professor Pascual Jordan, or Jordan, as we would say, has published shortly after the war, along with French scientist Thierry, I don't remember his first name, a kind of a theory of gravity theory and space-time theory, which was exploiting their work during the war. And it was mathematically, it was very complex, and but he almost got a Nobel Prize for this. But it was I mean, it didn't materialize because his connections with the SS were uncovered in the meantime. But they were what I'm referring you here to this fact that a document has been discovered which shows that the Germans were trying to control gravity in order to build a propulsion system. Pascual Jordan has developed an entire new theory of gravity during the war, which was for each, as I mentioned, he almost got a Nobel Prize after the war in 1949 or 1952. I don't remember exactly when it was, but it's what started emerging after my extensive work after some years is that entire new, I would say, levels or disciplines of their scientific and technological research started emerging out of this. Quite amazing in some cases.
I think that's one of the telling points about what happened. What were they doing right after the war? I always use the example of Kurt Diebner, who in 1947 patented nuclear propulsion for large ships. Where did he come up with that idea in the 2 years where you weren't doing any research? I wonder.
Exactly. One may assume that probably it hasn't come out of the blue sky. It was based on what they were doing during the war.
Now it's interesting that now I have on Heisenberg. I always had the thought because I've been to Gotov, I've been to Stadilm, and I've been to Heigelock. And
Mhm.
when I went to Heigelock, to me, I look at Heigelock as a diversion. I don't look at Heigelock as a genuine example of or try to set things up. Even Stadillen was more elaborate than that. I see it as this is what the Americans need to find to be able to come out and say that the Germans didn't do anything. End of story. That's even the floor is crooked. There's nothing in Hyperlock that looks like a genuine truck. Not even shielding. There's not even shielding in the damn thing.
The problem is such that the intelligence research teams plundering Germany after the war, looking for scientists and for technology and so on, they did assume, they did take an assumption a priori that what they are looking for must be some kind of a equivalent of the U.S. Manhattan Project.
Exactly.
Which wasn't the case, simply because it was so uncentralized.
Mm-hmm.
There were various institutions working on this quite independently. There were very many research projects relating to nuclear weapons, for example, in Germany. And Haigerlock was just a byproduct of one of these threads, but one of many. Even the SS had their own nuclear program.
Were they related to the anti-gravitational? Was it the same scientist or did the scientist? We talked about Joseph talk. You talked about the Kammerstab and how they exchanged information.
Not much is known about it because the SS had such a, in reverse brackets, advantage that they could afford destroying the entire workforce, because it consisted mostly of the inmates from the concentration camps, and even in a crucial cases, in a very important cases, they didn't hesitate to kill their own German staff. So they were able, the SS only was able to maintain secrecy even of large projects. In this way, so it's still, I mean, murky in a way, what they were doing.
My contention is that there was there must have been communication before the end of the war with American intelligence, probably Dulles, and some of the SS. Some of these research projects were handed over. Like Kamla destroyed Peenemünde completely before the Russians. They found nothing there. He evacuated the scientists. He handed over Doa Mittelbau intact. He went to Bergkristall before the Russians looted that, without that being destroyed before the Americans got there. The only reason why Kamla survived, no, I'm just using him for an example, not necessarily him,
is because he has traded some of the secrets for his life and the life of other,
That's what there must have been a deal made. Otherwise they would have blown everything up and killed all the scientists.
I have no doubt about it. It's obvious. Yes.
So what happened to all these? Where are we today? And I know, Joseph, I know you got stuff on this. Did the German anti-gravitational research, did that turn into the secret space program today?
Not really. The most important things were not sold or traded.
Right.
They have been evacuated to South America.
Right.
And they are still keeping a kind of finger on the pulse in this case. Mm-hmm. It's still active story.
Yes.
I did have some contacts with the Germans from out there.
Yeah.
And it confirms me that it's they still pin some hopes on this, that they will use it in the future. Mm-hmm. So I mean, they were very were informed. They could tell what I was doing and what I was about to do in the future, although I didn't write about it in any book at the time yet, for example. And what has emerged from this is that they do have it, they keep it, and they want to use it. Maybe not in such a sense that they will wage a war with this, but they are about to use it as a trump card
Mm-hmm.
in a way, uh, in some kind of a game, for they have in their plans.
Mm-hmm.
Is that them? Is that the who are was it's interesting to see who was them. There's a lot of Germans that evacuated after the war, ended up in South America. There was a underground, not I hate the term Nazi because it doesn't really serve the purpose. But there was an underground Nazi organization. We had the Spinner. We had all the post-war. You wrote a lot about that, Joseph.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, the old guard died off.
Mm-hmm.
Some went back to kickstart the EU back into a greater Germany. I'm contending on that. But where did the other people? Who are these people? Because there must be an international underground organization at this point.
The paradox, if I may reply to this, uh, the paradox is such that I mean, wartime story or wartime technology or documents in the United States or in Poland or in Germany and anywhere is, however we would look at this, it will be only a history without any, you know, uh, translation into our reality in which we live, material reality. But out there in Argentina or even in Chile, it's quite a different story because there were entire companies, even large companies, capital built on this. And this capital, these enterprises still exist, and
Mm-hmm.
the case is alive in a way. You cannot touch it without risking, uh, uh, returning with holes in the back, because it's something that is still quite organized because they have to defend themselves
Mm-hmm.
in order to maintain all this status quo, this what they have. Uh, 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 these are family fortunes
Yep.
uh, continued by second or third generation, but the money on which it was built is still active and is
Mm-hmm.
still sensitive in a way. You
Mm-hmm.
know, you have to be watchful if you're in such a situation. So they are still organized. They still have connections with other with secret services of various countries, quite deep connections, and they still have influence. Their influence out there is, I would say, it's something comparable to the situation of Jews in the United States. It's something like that, if I may say so.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What say you, Joseph?
Well, you know me, I basically have taken Igor's research and in a certain sense tried to reverse engineer it. So I came to the same conclusions that he just outlined, that this organization, through all of its corporate fronts, continued in South America and to a certain extent Mesoamerica. That a lot of these German families, it was a intergenerational transfer of capital, that they were still engaged in this research. I think, and like Igor, I think again they are still extremely influential. I've been making that part of my, what I call the Nazi International. We'll call it whatever you want to call it. And I also agree with Igor in that I do not think nothing has led me to the conclusion that all of this German wartime anti-gravity research became the basis for the American secret space program. I do think, I do think that there was some sort of negotiated deal during the Apollo moon missions between NASA and this German contingent to get their hands on some of that technology, because I absolutely firmly believe that that technology was what enabled us to get to the moon and then off of it once we got there. Nothing about the moon landing to me says that this was all accomplished with rockets. Um, and I've outlined my case for that. So I'm again in agreement with Igor. Now I do think that what Igor outlined in The Truth About the Wunderwaffe, and then what Nick Cook read Igor's book, and then he went on to publish The Hunt for Zero Point. And what Cook found, taking Igor's research as his springboard, when he got into the American space program, he discovered that there was this whole nest of anti-gravity research in the United States that no one wanted to talk about. And I think what happened is that somehow the American security apparatus, as I think also the Soviet security apparatus, got wind of what the Germans were really up to and decided, well, we've got to find out and try to reduplicate as much of it as possible. So I think in a certain sense, what the Germans were up to during World War II became the seed stock or the feedstock of all of these black projects in the United States and the Soviet Union. I can't see any other way of rationalizing it. But I agree with Igor. The Germans tried to keep as much of that top level, sophisticated, exotic technology in their own hands. While I'm at it, can I ask Igor some questions? I'm dying.
I was hoping you would.
Of course.
I'm dying to ask him. All right, Igor. You mentioned Pascual Jordan, and you've obviously uncovered some information about his wartime gravity theories, and Jordan, I think, folks, to give you an idea of the significance of Pascual Jordan. Jordan was one of the key founders of quantum mechanics. You simply cannot do anything in quantum mechanics without bumping into Pascual Jordan. He is a first rank theoretical physicist. No two ways about it. And yet here's this guy publishing this strange theory about the Earth increasing mass and density and so on and so forth. And what I want to ask you, you have mentioned in your books, Igor, the following scientists, and I'm wondering if you have connected them together or if you found out any more information about them. Is there, or have you ever run into a connection between Pascual Jordan and Ott Christian Hilgenberg? That's a name I'm sure that you've bumped into.
I have never found anything such like this.
All right.
No.
Have you ever found anything connecting Burkhard Heim to Heisenberg's team?
Not, because Heim was he was blind in he was blinded in an accident in the 1944 and 1940 or 1945. Right. I don't remember now. I may be wrong as to the exact year, but he was an assistant in a laboratory at the age of about 15 at then. Mm-hmm. So he was too young to play any important role in the. But on the other hand, perhaps some of the things on which he has developed his breaking theory later on, maybe it was based on some works that were left over from the from the other older people.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, because that's exactly what I think Heim's theory is based on. Yeah,
it's good. It's very likely, because it's quite unconceivable for him to develop it from scratch,
Right. Right.
from the very beginning in a relatively short period of time.
Okay.
So it's very likely. It's very likely, but nevertheless, it's obvious for me as well that the Germans, from the very beginning, were approaching this issue of controlling gravity, generating anti-gravity, and building a propulsion system
Right.
from the quantum point
Level.
of view.
Yeah. All
It,
right.
it you know Einstein's theory was for them a Jewish science.
Right.
It was condemned.
Right.
So, given the fact that they did have their own foundations, quantum physics,
Right.
it's it's uh, it's
That
hard
be
it's hard to imagine for them to develop such a technology
now.
based on Einstein's theory.
I want to get back to that in just a minute, but there's one more detailed question. In your truth about the Wunderwaffe, you mentioned a scientist at the University of Königsberg whose first name was Elizabeth. I can't remember her last name.
Adler.
Adler. Thank you,
Yes,
Elizabeth
but
Adler.
I have never found any confirmation that such a person existed.
Yeah,
And
that's been my problem. Yeah.
in fact, I have been I was it was suggested to me by a guy from our services, which had quite an experience in these topics, that it might have not been a true name, because
Mhm.
the SS, as part of their compartmentalization and other, efforts to conceal their most secret activities, they were this guy has pointed to the fact that my attention to the fact that there were cases where the scientists had different names used within the institution and in a correspondence
Right.
with other institutions, for example.
Right.
So it is likely that it was not the German. I mean, it was not a real person. It might
Right.
have been somebody else. But I have been. I have received a suggestion, by the way, that it was a woman, a mathematician,
Mhm.
known as Maria Reiche, who has uncovered the petroglyphs from the Nazca in Peru,
Uh-huh.
because she was a mathematician which worked during the war. As far as I remember, you may correct me, or somebody later on may correct me if I'm wrong, but I did have received such a suggestion that Maria Reiche might have been this Elizabeth Adler, because there were some things that she was saying shortly after the war that suggested that she was involved in some secret project during
Mhm.
the war
Mhm.
in Germany. But I cannot confirm it. I'm mentioning it just as a
Well,
curiosity.
if she was a mathematician and involved in things like runes and Nazca lines and so on and so forth, yeah, if the SS is going to have her involved in something, for sure.
So
Um,
there'll be an Ananaba connection to her as well.
yeah, on an Arabic connection. All right, I want to ask
Yeah,
you.
exactly.
I
Mhm.
want to ask you a loaded question, Igor. Um, you have in your truth about the Wunderwaffe, and then the books that you published that kind of led up to the truth. I actually saw some of them. My publisher had some of your previous books before the truth about the Wunderwaffe that were published in Polish, 5 volumes of different
Yeah.
things. You remember those? Um, the the thing I want to ask you is, you have alluded to the fact that the Germans during the war they rejected relativity because that was quote unquote Jewish science, and so as a result of that, the only solid scientific foundation that they had to fall back on was quantum mechanics, and therefore they're approaching all of this work that they're doing not from the standpoint of a theoretical physics having anything to do with general relativity, but having everything to do with trying to extrapolate all the implications of quantum mechanics that they can. So my question is, do you think that that may account for the breathtaking technological and, for that matter, theoretical development that you've uncovered in your truth about the Wunderwaffe, particularly with respect to anti-gravity? Do you think that may have had something to do with it?
Uh, it it might have been the reason why they have moved so far in this research.
Okay.
But my impression is that this direction has died after the war because it hasn't been continued
Interesting.
or picked up by anyone in any scientist, any Western scientists.
Why do you
Uh,
think that is? Is it because the post-war West is still trying to incorporate general
and
relativity?
yes, they pretty much do. It's an I mean, quite an unusual, I don't know how to name it, situation that
Mhm.
science, Western science, supposedly is developing at a tremendous rate. But on the other hand, they still rely on a theory which is without any doubt incomplete,
Yes.
over 100 years old, and despite a great number of signals from various directions
Mhm.
that suggest that there is a link between electromagnetism and gravity, for example,
Right.
they still reject it because they do base it on the grounds of the Einstein's theory. It's why they do they why they are stuck in it. It's I'm afraid of a psychological problem.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
I don't know exactly, but there are other directions which point to such a possibility that gravitation may be induced from electromagnetism.
Well,
For example, for example, by what is going on inside the superconductors, for example. But
superconductors. Yeah.
there are many directions. So the science our modern science just doesn't see that because they see it through the filter of the Einstein theory.
Yeah.
Ju-
I
ju-
I think the other thing that you pointed out in your research, Igor, that is so um, central and crucial to the story of this Nazi technological development is plasma. In
Mhm.
other words, you zeroed in on what I think are the two basic fundamental things that were driving this technology: quantum mechanics and plasma physics. In fact, you spent a great deal of your time in Truth About the Wunderwaffe writing about the Bell in relationship to plasma studies. You even showed the example of the plasma trap there at the University of Warsaw, to show the similarity of the type of technology that you were talking about. And I think again that plasma physics, especially, is where they've had the blinders on, because you've got Richter down in Argentina, and he's playing around with plasmas and doing, again, as you pointed out, a rotating experiment in plasma that no one else is thinking to do.
Yeah, there was a German in his team out there,
Yeah.
which has mentioned in an article later on. His name was Ehrenberg.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He was mentioned that as a byproduct, supposedly byproduct of the Richter's experiments, they were some quoting terrifying ball lightnings
Yes.
created generated. So It's quite close to the idea of spinning plasma,
Yeah.
But may I explain shortly why this connection with plasma is so important?
Sure.
You know, uh, what has been demonstrated in various experiments in various countries is that a spinning superconductor in a strong magnetic field
Hmm.
creates some kind of anti-gravitational effect, namely diminishing gravity by 1%, 2%.
Hmm.
Nick Cook has mentioned that Podkletnov,
Yes.
Eugene Podkletnov, was working later on in Japan in Toshiba, and he was able supposedly to diminish the gravity by 5%.
Hmm.
But generally, it's about the idea that which takes place inside the superconductor, that
Hmm.
you know uh, the magnetic it completely separates magnetic fields from each other, or the fields inside the superconductor from the external fields. It's
Hmm.
100% separation. And uh, there is a problem with superconductors, such that they are not very mechanically resistant. They
Right.
cannot nor they cannot be spinned with very high velocities,
Hmm.
nor they can withstand very strong magnetic fields.
Hmm.
But with with plasma, it doesn't occur,
Hmm.
because you can spin plasma with tremendous speeds, close to the speed of light, for example.
Hmm.
The plasma vortex compresses itself.
Yep.
There is no centrifugal forces, for example. They are compensated by the phenomena taking place inside. So there is it is possible to create a density of energy within plasma and velocities higher by many orders of magnitudes
Hmm.
than what when compared with the superconductors, for example. And it's it if you may imagine that, for example, if we can achieve 1% of 2% reduction of gravity by the superconductor, then in plasma you may spin the plasma thousands of times
Hmm.
faster, and create electromagnetic fields thousands or hundreds of thousands of times stronger than in superconductors. So that's why it is the key. But it is a tricky, idea, because as in a very in every plasma accelerator, there is a problem that
Hmm.
if you achieve such a speeds of heavy ions, you must ensure that there are no collisions of these
Right.
ions with the general structure, because it generates radioactivity,
Hmm.
generally, neutrons and so on. So it's a technologically it's quite difficult, but it shows, these experiments generally show that plasma is promising. That's what I wanted to add.
Let me ask you another leading question. If the Germans were making some sort of connection between plasma and anti-gravity, as you suggested earlier, is this the reason why we have yet to see any real fusion breakthrough? Because there would be an inherent anti-gravity connection between any controlled fusion breakthrough, because it's based in plasma, of course, and gravity. In other words, are they deliberately withholding any real breakthroughs because they really haven't figured out how are we going to keep the anti-gravity genie in the bottle. I hope I'm making some sort of sense there.
Yes, you do, but I just don't know that. I was never wondering about it, and I don't now. I know little about fusion approaches to fusion in plasma.
Okay.
How far advanced towards these does it seem that the German scientists were at that time? That we officially know of in mainstream science journals. What have come out that in the years after the war, of new research? I always found if they did something during the war, we could look at what they did then in official mainstream science uh, within 5-10 years after. So what have officially been acknowledged that they knew or that we know?
Officially, there is no confirmation that they have finished it. I mean, there is no any.
Interesting.
There are descriptions of a complete propulsion system, not just the bell, because it was. I assumed that it was something part of something larger, but there are descriptions. But it's all unverifiable. The closest I would say, on my rather intuition, I would say that they were quite close on the brink of making it and producing it, but on the brink, but not further. I would say
Right.
there is one suggestion, which is not any proof itself, but it may suggest that they were preparing operational use of this. Is that a base has been discovered? Then it was extreme northeastern end of the of Norway, on the border with Russia, with Soviet Union. Then today it's on Russian territory. The place is called Linnahamari, and there are very interesting structures out there,
I've heard of this place. Yeah.
which look like pods, like uh, circular pod, large structures like pods for missiles, for rockets, for large rockets. But they are in the 100 feet diameter order of magnitude, the size. I mean, it's very large, and it's very mysterious because it doesn't fit any known picture of any base, But what is strange here is that it has been built on a territory closest, on a part of the territory occupied by the Germans, closest to the United States, effectively. It's the pretty much the northernmost extremity of Norway. And it's very strange because it suggests that something that was to use it was circular and very large, the size of one long bus, for example, or two buses, this order of magnitude. And perhaps because it was the SS. I've heard that the SS was present out there during the war in this construction efforts. So perhaps they were building a base already, but it's only a suspicion. I cannot prove it, but it looks strange. It looks very strange, and in my mind, I turn attention to this place because I still remember the something that Admiral Richard Byrd has mentioned in an interview for a Chilean, I guess, radio or newspaper during the Operation High Jump in 1947. he has mentioned that
Hold the pole.
the United States has to take seriously. I mean, I'm saying it from memory. I'm not exact. It's not an exact quotation. That the United States has to really look at the possibility of the enemy whose flying crafts are able to fly from one pole to the other one.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's this base is quite close to the pole, and that's why I raised my interest.
What's the name of that place again, Igor?
Linnahamari, Linnaham, like Martha,
Uh-huh.
Ari.
Got it. Thank you. I will
And I'm
look at
just
that.
seeing a
Yeah.
spike in Google Earth right now. Particular area. Like, what the hell happened here? 4 Eskimos in Russia are being Googled, right?
I'm just mentioning it as something that might
Yeah.
be worth researching in
Well, what
the
really
future.
backs that
Oh,
up?
I think you're onto something, Igor. Right? Every intuition in my body tells me that you're onto something. You and I have been around this for far too long, so that we know to trust those.
And what really backs this up is the fact that the Germans kept 200,000-300,000 soldiers in Norway all the
Norway,
way up to the very end when
of
there's
the
no more
war.
use for them. And we were always
Supposedly they were defending it very fiercely,
Yes.
which didn't make any sense from other points of view, because it was on the outskirts of the empire that was collapsing already.
Igor, is this place anywhere close to Spitsbergen?
No, it's quite far.
Far from Spitsbergen? All right.
It's quite far. Spitsbergen is quite far from the shores of Norway.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly, but you have to look.
Well,
at
the reason I'm asking about Spitsbergen is, again, during the war.
Yeah, I know
the Tirpitz went on that very strange mission to blast a British radio weather station into Smith, which of course it did. But I've always wondered, why are the Germans bothering to send a battleship to take out a British weather station? So I'm thinking maybe there was something more that the British were trying to listen in on perhaps whatever was going on. Who knows? I don't know, but I just thought that very curious.
But yeah,
go on.
Tino.
No, you go on.
I'm sorry for saying this, but I just have to quit. I have other things to do.
Oh, okay.
So maybe we will continue after some time. And
I think we have to, because we haven't talked about any of your new books. What are you writing about now?
Generally, I'm writing about what is going on with our civilization.
So that's kind of what I wanted the three of us to talk about. You can't hold for another half an hour about the nothing that's happening in the world today.
No, I can't.
All right.
Maybe another time. Maybe we will make a second round of it.
I think we should, because it's not like there's nothing going on in the world these days.
It's I don't know how to summer, how to describe it, but it's nothing is going on, only that this world is going to an end. I mean, in the shape that we know. It's not that it physically will cease to exist, but changes are coming.
Yeah.
We live in interesting times, as we usually say.
Yeah.
So to speak.
All right, Igor. Well, sorry you have to run, but we will catch you definitely do this again.
With pleasure.
Outstanding.
It's nice to meet
Just-
you finally, Igor, and to talk. Thank you so much.
Me too. It was pleasure for me too. So I look forward to continue, but I just not today.
Okay, I'll see you soon. Right. So,
Yes. Well, that was a mouthful.
My name is Tino Struckmann. I run Lost Battlefields. Every year, I travel around the world to try to bring you to all the most interesting historical military locations from modern wars and the World War II special projects, battlefields, forts, fortresses, and tunnels, everything else. Things you may not be able to see or go to yourselves. Please join me on Patreon or join Lost Battlefields through the website so you get access to all my files and my notes. It really does help, and like, follow, share here on the channel if you can. That helps too.